This LOS is calculate and interpret the bank discount yield, holding period yield, effective annual yield, and money market yield for U.S. Treasury bills and other money market instruments. Okay, this LOS and the next one is a good example again where you cover something in the quant section and it comes up again later in corporate finance, in this case under working capital management, where the LOS is to calculate and interpret comparable yields on various securities. So it's going to go through much of the same information that we have here. And I wrote a little bit of a study tip here. It says, in review sessions that I've done, this is one area that always needs more work. And so you need to practice the calculations and memorize the rules. We're going to see a set of rules as we go through the calculations, where if you've just memorized this set of rules, sometimes you can answer quite a few of the multiple choice questions without doing any of the math. And what it is here is that the bond equivalent yield is greater than the money market yield, greater than the bank discount yield, which is greater than the holding period yield. But we're going to see that on the next couple of slides. Okay, we'll go through this slide slowly. So some securities, such as T-bills and bankers' acceptance, are issued at a discount. Thus, the investor invests less than the face value of the security and receives the face value back at maturity. And we're going to look at an example on the next slide using some numbers. So the difference between the purchase price and the face value is the discount interest. T-bills are quoted on a bank discount basis rather than on a price basis. The bank discount basis is a quoting convention that annualizes based on a 360-day year the discount as a percentage of the face value. And you can see that here with the first formula. The bank discount basis yield, or the BDY, bank discount yield, or sometimes even just called the discount yield. What is the formula? It's discount over face times 360 over T. Discount over face times 360 over T, so that's a convention that annualizes 360 over T. The discount as a percentage of face value, because we've got discount over face, okay? So that's the first formula that you need to memorize. The second is the holding period yield. Well, we've seen the holding period yield in previous LOS when we were dealing with stocks. It was just the ending price minus the beginning plus the dividend at the end divided by the beginning price. Or here in this case, we're talking about money market, it's just going to be face value minus the purchase price divided by the purchase price. Ending minus beginning divided by beginning. So the holding period yield, quite similar here. The effective annual yield, of course, is 1 plus the holding period yield to 365 over T, okay? And the money market yield is the holding period yield times 360 over T. And so therefore, with a little bit of algebra, you can see flipping that around, the holding period yield is also the money market yield times T over 360, okay? Because this is CFA 101, where given, there's four variables here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Given 3, solve for the fourth, And sometimes there's a subcalculation where you need to work your way through, and we're going to see that later, okay? And the money market yield can also be quoted in another way, and this is important because it links the top formula down to this one as well. The money market yield is 360 times the bank discount yield divided by 360 minus T times the bank discount yield, okay? So that's another formula that you just absolutely have to memorize. So a bit of formula memorization in this LOS and a bit of practice doing the calculations as well. The next slide, we're going to do a practice problem. Okay, here's a good little practice problem, typical of something you'd find on CFA Level 1. The dollar discount on a U.S. Treasury bill with 91 days until maturity is $2,100. The face value is $100,000. So the bank discount yield on the bill is closest to A, 8.31%, B, 8.4%, or C, 8.58%. Okay, the correct answer is A, and we're going to see. So you have to, again, memorize the formula. When you see it's the bank discount yield, that's discount over face times 360 over T. So if you bring up the calculator, this should be a fairly easy question to run your way through. So it's going to be 2100 divided by 100,000, discount over face, times, just remember to use 360, divided by 91, which is our t, a number of days. And if you want to multiply it by 100, just to check, it's closest to 8.31a, okay? So the key thing here is you have to remember that it's 360 in the numerator. If you use 365, you'll get a different answer. Let's check if we use 365. 2100 divided by 100,000 times 365 divided by 91. And if we multiply that by 100, we'd get the wrong answer, 8.42. We might be selecting that it's B. So that in this case, you can see the answers, if you make a small mistake or can't remember the formula perfectly, guaranteed you're going to get the wrong answer. So just be careful. Discount over face times 360 over t, and it's an easy calculation. If you're up to speed on that, less than 90 seconds, very easy. You're happy to see that type of question on the exam. Okay, this slide looks a little bit busy at first, but I just wanted to keep everything onto one page in terms of all the calculations so that you can compare them all. And so this is an example. Again, it's bought at a discount, so it's a $100,000 T-bill. It's got 150 days left to maturity, and it's bought for $98,000. So the discount interest right away is the $2,000. That's easy. And the proceeds when it matures, you're going to get back $100,000. So we know, if we went down to the holding period yield for sure, that's the easiest one. It's just face value minus purchase price divided by the purchase price. So that'll be 2,000 over 98,000, and that would give you a holding period yield of 2.04%. So that should be an easy one. Step number 2, the formula that we've just seen from the previous practice question shouldn't be too bad. The bank discount yield. That's discount over face times 360 over t. So 2,000 over 100,000 times 360 over 150, we're going to get 4.8%. Fantastic. How do I do the effective annual yield? Well, it's 1 plus the holding period yield, 365 over t. Here we've calculated the holding period yield. So it's 1 plus the holding period yield, 365 over t, and that's going to give us 5.03928%. And now the money market yield. Remember the money market yield from that list of the formula sheet? Holding period yield times 360 over t. So we're using that holding period yield again, times 360 over 150, and we're getting 4.898%. And don't forget, I said this is an important one, we can also write the money market yield as 360 times the bank discount yield, which we calculated up here, the 4.8%, divided by 360 minus the number of days, t, times that bank discount yield. And that's going to give us 4.898%, which is the same. But there's two different ways that you can calculate that. So again, depending on the given information, in the next LOS where you need to convert between yields, you've got to know these formulas and know how to run your way through them. So it says here, and that's at the bottom, this is leading into the next LOS, is that we can convert back and forth between the holding period yields, the money market yields, and the effective annual yields by using the holding period yield, which is common to all the calculations, and that's why I put it in green. Holding period yield, holding period yield, holding period yield. Runs through the effective annual yield to the money market yield. Okay? So that's important, and it's important to practice that. Okay, this slide is just fast forwarding again to working capital, an example that corporate finance, an example that comes right out of that reading. And I just wanted to include it here because it shows you a little bit of a wrinkle. In this case, it's a $1 million security that pays 5% interest with 1 month remaining to maturity, and they don't give you the purchase price. So I just want to show you how you run through that calculation very quickly. They're bought at a discount, so it'd be the 1 million minus, and it's not that difficult. You just do 5% times 1 month divided by 12 times $1 million, and it's going to give you the purchase price 995,833.33. So we know that the discount interest in that case is the 4166.67. Okay? So the holding period yield, face value minus purchase price over purchase price, would be the 4166.67 divided by the million, gives us 0.00417. Okay? So down here, this is an important little section. We can see that 5%. Remember, that's a naming, that's a convention, pricing, quoting convention. Okay? And so if we take that discount now over the face times 360 over t, that's where we're getting the 5%. 4166.67 divided by a million times 360 over t, 5%. So it's a quoting convention. $1 million security that pays 5% in interest with 1 month remaining. What is the purchase price? A, you can calculate the purchase price, and then B, you can run it through the bank discount yield and see that it's going to give you 5%. Okay? So then just carrying on, again, it's just a little bit of practice converting through the yields for the rest of it. We can see the effective annual yield, 1 plus the holding period yield to 365 over t. That's going to give us 5.246%. And the money market yield is going to be the holding period yield times 360 over t, which gives you a slightly lower rate. And the money market yield running through the using the other formula for the bank discount yield, 360 times the bank discount yield divided by 360 minus t times the bank discount yield, and that's going to give you 5.02092%. And again, I showed you here annualizing the yield. It's going to give you the same as the money market yield. So a couple of formulas that you need to run through, and also, as I said, when we get to the next LOS, converting between yields based on the data that's given to you. Okay, this is the last slide for this LOS, and it's just a formula review, and it's the formulas that you need to memorize. So the first one, the holding period yield, ending minus beginning divided by beginning, and that's for money market instruments. I just put over here on the right-hand side for stocks as an FYI, bit of a reminder. The money market yield is going to be the holding period yield times 360 over the days to maturity, okay? Effective annual yield, easy, 1 plus the holding period yield, 365 over t, because we're going to annualize it, okay? Now the bond equivalent yield, that is also the holding period yield times 365 over the number of days. So you can see the money market yield and the bond equivalent yield, very similar formula, but with the bond equivalent yield, we've got 365 days in the numerator. So what does that do? 365 is greater than 360, so the bond equivalent yield is greater than the money market yield. And that's why I said down here we've got our little rule. Sometimes we can answer questions just based on memorizing the rule, that the bond equivalent yield, because it's 365, is greater than the money market yield, is greater than the discount basis yield, which is greater than the holding period yield, okay? And so finally down here, the discount basis yield, you got to be careful here, because look at what's in the denominator. It's not the beginning value, it's the face value. So face value minus purchase price divided by face value times 360 over the number of days to maturity, okay? Okay, I'm just finishing the LOS with a quick screen grab of the CFA Level 1 ebook. And I just want to remind, again, candidates, that it's important after you've done the work to scan through all the readings. Is extremely important. And to, in particular, focus on these blue box examples, because as it says here, the next example will help consolidate your knowledge of the 3 yield measures. So sometimes it's not just memorizing the formula and how to do the calculations, but again, there's some extra added information, value add information in these blue boxes. So as you can see here, table 7 is 3 commonly used yield measures, the holding period yield, which we're good at, and you can see that's giving the stock one with the dividends. The effective annual yield, which is just taking the holding period yield, and then it's to 365 over t, okay? And then we've got our money market yield, which we know, and that's given, you know, in the one format. With regards to that formula, we can calculate it another way, okay? So then if you look at the example, So in terms of consolidating it, it's asking you which yields are appropriate for finding the present value of $1,000 to be received in 150 days. So, okay, we've memorized the formulas. We're good on that. We can crank through the calculations. We can convert between yields. But this is perhaps something that we hadn't thought of. And you get a question like that on the exam, and it's forcing you to think a bit. But if you've done the work and then gone through and paid close attention to the examples, and you pick up on an example like this, you'd say, oh, it's the holding period yield is appropriate. And then if I just scroll down a little bit, you can see it just works its way through the example in that solution. And when you go back and look at something like this after you've done a bit of work, you'll find that it all becomes a lot easier. And as it says, it helps to consolidate all your learnings. You get a question on the exam, it may not be what you expect, but you're able to answer it correctly. Thank you.